Hey, I'm Lulua Khazzoom. Welcome to Kaffé Khazzoom. This week, I'm going to be telling you stories about and singing on the theme of Simchat Torah, which is the Jewish holiday celebrating receiving the Torah or the Hebrew Bible while the Jews were wandering around in the desert. And back between 1990 and 2010, I offered groundbreaking Jewish multicultural programs. And one of the common responses that I got when I went to leaders of Jewish schools or organizations or synagogues was that they wanted people to sing what they were familiar with. And that created this recursive loop where all that people learned about was Central and Eastern European Jewish heritage. And then I was being told that they could only sing or discuss or whatever what they had already learned about. So it was quite the wall to break through. And one of the things that I always did was propose teaching Middle Eastern, North African Jewish songs for Simchat Torah. And the reason is that these songs are so upbeat and catchy and earwormy that there's no way that anyone from any background would not be super into them. And so somehow I would manage to break through and, get them to give me a shot. And inevitably, everybody would just be so thrilled with the songs, and then they want more and more and more. So one of the songs that I taught was Eli Eli Lama. And during Simchat Torah, we have Haqafoth, which is that the men would circle around the Taba, which is the like the bima, the platform in the middle of the synagogue, the middle of the men's section to be more exact. And they would carry the Torot, and these Torot are very heavy because in the Middle Eastern North African Jewish community, they're made out of wood or silver or gold, and they're cases. They're not the scroll with a material over it. And because they couldn't hold a book, they needed to have songs that were easy to remember. So that's what made the songs from Simchat Torah the easiest to teach people, is that there were these very simple and catchy choruses. So one of the songs, Eli Eli Lama, was a favorite of people when I taught the various songs. And there was once that I was leading a workshop or a few different workshops at Kala, which is the Jewish Renewal Conference. And there was this one point in the conference where I was walking around the campus singing Eli Eli Lama with a drum, and there was just this line of people following me like the Pied Piper, and everybody was singing the chorus with me. So the first song that I ever wrote for my band Iraqis in Pajamas that incorporated the Iraqi Jewish prayers was Eli Eli Lama, and it was to talk about an issue that I had just experienced in the Jewish community that was just this recurring issue that was constantly frustrating me. And I felt, well, why not draw from an Iraqi Jewish song to be talking about this issue? And when I created this song, it was like, it felt really good to combine these two different parts of myself. Prior to that, I had only been writing straight up alternative or punk rock. And so I'm going to go ahead and sing you the original version of the song, just a little bit of it, and then I'm going to sing to you what that song turned into. Obviously, this is just the bass and vocals part, but you can hear the song on the Iraqis in Pajamas debut album, which is a self-titled album. It's an LP. And you can find it either on IraqisinPajamas.com, or you can find us on any of the streaming platforms and just look for the song Conformity when you find the Iraqis in Pajamas site. Oh, I was going to sing it first, the original version. Eli Eli lama lo thabane mishkan shilo, Eli Eli lama ba'u goyim berbulo, Eli Eli lama goy azpani ma'ashelo, Eli Eli lama darach kocha behilo, Eli Eli lama hadrat panim tena'lo, Eli Eli lama welo thashi begebulo, Eli Eli lama zanahta ba'arselo, Eli Eli lama hamdat Yisrael kullo, Eli Eli lama طيبوا هخلو أو إلي لما إلا هدا علما إلي لما إلا هدا علما. So it's call and response. Now, traditionally, it was actually the person carrying the Torah that said Eli lama. Remember, it's easiest for that person to just say those few words, and the congregation would do the response part, Lo tibane mishkan shilo, or whatever. But because I was teaching this to people who had no background in any traditions outside of Central and Eastern European Jewish heritage, I taught them to do Eli lama. So though I was the one doing the calling, I did the quote-unquote more difficult part. In the most recent version of this song, which is not the version that's on the Iraqis in Pajamas debut album, we actually start off with the original version, and the guitarist and I are clapping, the drummer is drumming the rhythms, and then we segue into the punk rock version of the song. I'm just going to sing it for you the way that it is on the Iraqis in Pajamas debut album. I wanted the cohesion of community, but the price was conformity. I wanted the cohesion of community, but the price was conformity. I wanted the cohesion of community, but the price was conformity. I wanted the cohesion of community, but the price was conformity! Eli lama lo tibnei mishkan shilo Eli lama ba'u goim berbolo Eli lama gor'as pani ma'ashelo Eli lama darach kocha behilo. Oh Eli lama illa hada alma Eli lama illa hada alma. Ho, 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 ho. Ho, 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 ho. Ho, 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 ho. Ho, 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 ho. I wanted the cohesion of community, but the price was conformity. I wanted the cohesion of community, but the price was conformity. I wanted the cohesion of community, but the price was conformity. I wanted the cohesion of community, but the price was conformity! Eli lama lo tibni mishkan shilo Eli lama ba'u goim berbolo Eli lama goyes pani mashelo Eli lama darach kocha behilo Eli lama hadrat panim tenalo Eli lama welo thashi begebulo Eli lama zanahta ba'aras lo Eli lama حمدت إسرائيل كله إلي لما طيبوا ثخلو. أو إلي لما إلا هدا علما إلي لما إلا هدا علما إلي لما إلي لما إلي لما. Oh, Eli lama. So for the last piece of this installment of Kaffé Khazzoom with the Simchat Torah theme, I'm going to read to you from my book, The Flying Camel, Essays on Identity by Women of North African and Middle Eastern Jewish Heritage. This is an essay by Yael Arami, who is a Yemenite Israeli woman, and the essay is called A Synagogue of One's Own, and this section talks about her experience during Sukkot and Simchat Torah. In my family, both nuclear and extended, our role as women was fulfilled preliminarily by doing housework and preparing food for everyone. This division of labor reached its peak during the holidays, especially Sukkot and Pesach. At Sukkot, the men built the sukkah. The women prepared vast quantities of food for the members of the extended family who would be coming for the holiday feasts. Preparing the traditional dishes, however, was only the first part of the job. The second was to serve the food, carrying course after course out to the sukkah, and to cater to every whim of the men who, of course, never left their seats. I remember an incident that took place when I was in 6th or 7th grade. The family was seated in the sukkah, and my uncle was ordering the women back and forth, demanding that they bring him salt or some dish. I was so busy catering to his needs that I hardly managed to partake in the meal. At some point, I'd had enough and simply refused to continue back and forth to serve him. "Praise be God," I told him, "for he has endowed you too with 2 arms and 2 legs, so that you can get up yourself and bring to the table whatever you desire." My uncle, angry at having his authority questioned, tried to reestablish his prerogative with a bit of disingenuous logic. "You're seated near the exit to the sukkah," he countered, "and are thus closer to the house." He was right, of course. The women had been intentionally seated near the exit to facilitate their functioning as waitresses to the men. "All right," I said, "then let's change places." Tempers flared, and my mother hung her head in embarrassment. Her poorly brought up and disrespectful daughters had shamed her yet again. At the end of Sukkot, on Simchat Torah, the holiday that marks both the end and the beginning of the annual cycle of weekly Torah readings, the women once again were excluded from action at the synagogue. Unlike the men, the women were not allowed to dance with the sacred Torah schools for at least 2 reasons. Women were generally forbidden from dancing in view of men, and it was seen as inconceivable that women, made unclean by menstruation, should even touch the holy book. In the Talmud, it is expressly written that Torah scrolls cannot contract impurity by touching objects or people believed to be impure. What's more, the Torah tells the story of Miriam, who does not ask for permission to dance after crossing the Red Sea out of Egypt. She grabs a drum and gathers the women around her. They dance and sing together. Traditions that help establish male privilege and women's exclusion, nonetheless, are always useful to the patriarchy and can acquire the force of law, even when they contradict the written law in both spirit and letter. So that's from my book, The Flying Camel, Essays on Identity by Women of North African and Middle Eastern Jewish Heritage. This is the original book that was published in 2003, and it is going to be republished very shortly, and the new edition features Yemenite Israeli celebrity musicians Aiwa on the cover. I'm thrilled to have them as the face of the new version of the book. You can pre-order the book on my store at Khazzoom.com. And keep in mind that if you become a Patreon member, you will receive previews as well as discounts and exclusive content. So you'll be able to get a copy of the book before anybody else does. And you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/Khazzoom. Thanks for listening to Kaffé Khazzoom, and wishing you Shabbat Shalom, Hag Sameach, Modin Simcha, and Tizku Lishanim Rabot U'Na'imot.